I found out my wife was sleeping with her boss on a Monday. 30 days later, he was fired, blacklisted in our industry, and facing a lawsuit. She was divorced, homeless, and begging me to take her back. How did I do it so fast? Simple. I didn't get emotional, I got strategic. I recorded everything, documented every company policy they violated, filed complaints with HR, the state labor board, and his professional licensing organization, and I made sure every single person who mattered knew exactly what kind of man he was. People think revenge takes time. It doesn't. It just takes precision. This is the story of how I destroyed 2 lives in 30 days using nothing but evidence, employment law, and their own arrogance against them. And I'd do it again in a heartbeat. Chapter 1. The Discovery. Finding out your wife is screwing her way to the top. My name's Marcus Webb, and I'm a 36-year-old financial analyst living in Houston, Texas. I work for an investment firm downtown, long hours, decent money, the kind of job where you're always on call, but it pays the bills. And then some. I've been married to Jennifer for 6 years, together for 9 total. We met at a friend's barbecue in Austin back when we were both broke 20-somethings trying to figure our lives out. She was funny, ambitious, and had this energy that just pulled people in. I fell hard, proposed after 3 years, and thought we were building something real. That illusion shattered on a random Tuesday afternoon in February. I was working from home that day, had a morning full of client calls, and figured I'd save the commute. Our house is in the Heights, nice neighborhood, 2-story place we'd stretched our budget to afford because Jennifer said it was important for her career to have an address that looked successful. I was in my home office around 2 p.m., wrapping up a report, when I got up to grab another coffee from the kitchen. I walked past Jennifer's office. She worked from home twice a week as an account manager for a software sales company called TechBridge Solutions. Her door was cracked open, and I could hear voices. Not unusual. She was always on Zoom calls with clients or her team, but as I passed, I heard a man's voice say something that made me freeze mid-step. "I can still taste you from this morning." I stopped breathing. The voice was low, intimate, the kind of tone you don't use with a colleague. I pushed the door open slightly and saw Jennifer's laptop on her desk, screen showing a Zoom call with a man I recognized, Richard Chun, the VP of sales at her company. 50-something, salt and pepper hair, expensive suit. I'd met him twice at company events. Married guy with grown kids. Jennifer wasn't at her desk. I could hear water running. She'd stepped away to use the bathroom. Richard was still on the screen, smiling to himself. And then he seemed to realize she wasn't there, and his expression changed. He ended the call abruptly. I stood there in her doorway, coffee mug in my hand, trying to process what I'd just heard. "I can still taste you from this morning." There was no innocent explanation for that. No way to spin it as a misunderstanding. My wife was sleeping with her boss, and from the casual way he'd said it, like it was routine, this wasn't new. My stomach dropped like I'd been gut punched. I felt this weird mix of rage and nausea and disbelief all at once. Part of me wanted to wait for her to come back, grab her by the shoulders, and demand she tell me what the hell was going on. But another part, the logical part that's kept me alive in high-stress finance jobs, kicked in and told me to shut up and think. I walked back to my office, closed the door, and sat down at my desk with my hands shaking. My mind was racing. Richard Chun, her boss, the guy who controlled her promotions, her bonuses, her entire career trajectory at that company. She'd gotten promoted twice in the last year, from junior account manager to senior, then to lead on their biggest client account. She'd been pulling in bigger commissions, traveling more for conferences, coming home later from client dinners. Holy shit, she was literally sleeping her way up the corporate ladder. And here I was working 60-hour weeks, grinding through earnings reports and financial models to make sure we could afford our mortgage, our cars, our lifestyle. I was the stable one, the responsible one. and she was screwing her married boss in between sales calls. The rage hit me in waves, but I forced myself to stay calm. I'd spent enough time on Reddit, yeah, I'm that guy, reading our /surviving infidelity and our /divorce stories to know one critical thing. The person who acts first with evidence wins. The person who confronts first without proof loses. I couldn't just storm into her office and scream at her. She'd deny it, gaslight me, delete evidence, maybe even flip the script, and make me look like the paranoid husband. No, I needed documentation. Hard evidence. Text messages, emails, photos, financial records, witness statements, anything that would prove the affair in court and protect me legally and financially. I opened my laptop and started researching like my life depended on it because, in a way, it did. Texas divorce law. Workplace affair regulations. What constitutes sexual harassment? Abuse of power in the workplace. Company policy violations. Over the next 2 hours, while Jennifer was finishing her workday downstairs like nothing was wrong, I was educating myself on how to destroy her and Richard legally. And here's what I realized. This wasn't just infidelity. This was potentially a sexual harassment case. Richard was her direct supervisor. He had power over her career. If he'd promised her promotions or raises in exchange for sexual favors, and I was willing to bet he had, that was quid pro quo sexual harassment, which is illegal as hell under Texas employment law. Their company almost certainly had anti-fraternization policies. They'd probably violated expense reporting policies if they were using company money for their little rendezvous. This wasn't just a messy divorce waiting to happen. This was a career-ending, reputation-destroying, legally actionable nightmare for both of them. And I was going to make sure it exploded in their faces. Jennifer came downstairs around 6, all smiles, asked me how my day was. I kissed her hello, same as always, and asked about hers. Oh, the usual. Crazy day with client calls. Richard's really pushing us to close the Q1 numbers. She said his name so casually, like it meant nothing. I nodded, played along. He's a hard boss, huh? He's intense, but he's great at what he does. I'm learning a lot from him. She smiled at me, and I wanted to throw up. We made dinner together, watched Netflix, went to bed. She curled up against me like she always did, and I laid there staring at the ceiling, finalizing my plan. I had 30 days. Our mortgage was refinancing in 30 days, and I needed to stay married on paper until it went through to protect my financial interests. But 30 days was also enough time to gather evidence that would obliterate both of them, personally, professionally, legally. I wasn't going to just divorce Jennifer and move on. That was too easy. She'd get sympathy, play the victim, probably end up marrying Richard and living off my alimony payments. Hell no. I was going to make sure she lost her job, her reputation, any shred of sympathy anyone might have for her. And Richard? I was going to end his career so completely that he'd never work in our industry again. The clock started ticking that night. 30 days. That's all I needed to destroy 2 lives using nothing but evidence, employment law, and their own arrogance. They had no idea what was coming. Chapter 2. Evidence collection. Recording everything and building an airtight case. The morning after I discovered the affair, I woke up before Jennifer and went straight to work. Not my actual job, the other job, the one where I'd become a forensic investigator in my own marriage. First stop, our shared iCloud account. See, when Jennifer and I got married, we set up an Apple family account to share subscriptions and photos. It was one of those things you do when you're building a life together, trusting each other completely. She'd completely forgotten about it. I hadn't. I grabbed my laptop, logged into her iCloud using the family account credentials, and went straight to the backup files. Jennifer had automatic backups enabled on her iPhone, another thing she'd set up years ago and never thought about again. That backup included everything. And I mean everything. Text messages, photos, app data, even stuff she deleted from her phone. I hit restore on the most recent backup and watched years of data download to my computer. What I found made me want to put my fist through the wall. Hundreds of messages between Jennifer and Richard Chun going back 10 months. 10 months! This wasn't some recent mistake or moment of weakness. This was a sustained, calculated affair that had been going on for almost a year while I worked my ass off to support us. The messages were explicit. Stuff I'm not going to detail because, honestly, reading them once was enough to burn them into my brain forever. But it wasn't just the sexual content that gutted me. It was the intimacy, the inside jokes, the planning. Meet me in my office after the 3 p.m. call, door will be locked. Can't wait to taste you again. Thinking about last night in the hotel. And then there were the messages about me. Marcus has no clue, LOL. He actually thanked me for working so hard on my career. Your husband sounds boring. When are you leaving him? Eventually. Need to time it right. He makes good money, and I'm not stupid. I sat there at 4:30 in the morning, reading my wife and her boss laugh about how clueless I was, and something inside me just went cold. Not hot anger, ice-cold fury. The kind that doesn't make you scream or throw things. The kind that makes you methodical. But here's what really sealed their fate. The messages where Richard explicitly promised Jennifer career advancement in exchange for sex. Keep me happy and that senior account manager promotion is yours. You earned that bonus in more ways than one winking face. The Miami conference is approved. Just make sure we get a room with a king bed. That wasn't just an affair. That was textbook quid pro quo sexual harassment. Richard was using his position of power to extract sexual favors in exchange for career benefits. It was illegal, unethical, and exactly what I needed to destroy both of them. I spent the next 3 hours taking screenshots of everything, hundreds of them. I backed them up to 3 separate cloud drives, Google, Dropbox, and a private server I set up specifically for this. Then I printed hard copies and put them in a safe deposit box at a bank across town that Jennifer didn't know about. This wasn't just evidence for divorce court. This was ammunition for obliterating Richard's career and making sure Jennifer never worked in corporate sales again. Next move, audio surveillance. I drove to Best Buy that afternoon while Jennifer was at work and bought a pack of voice-activated recorders. Tiny little devices that look like USB thumb drives, but record up to 20 hours of audio. Texas is a one-party consent state, which meant as long as I was present for the conversation or it was happening in my property, recording was completely legal. I placed one in Jennifer's car, tucked into the center console, under some napkins. One in her work bag. She had this fancy leather tote she carried everywhere, and I slipped the recorder into an interior pocket she never used, and one in our bedroom, hidden in my nightstand. Over the next week, I collected hours of recordings that were even more damaging than the text messages, phone calls between Jennifer and Richard where they discussed their affair openly. I told Marcus I was having drinks with the team. He bought it completely. Her voice was so casual, so dismissive. Like I was just some obstacle she had to navigate around. Calls with her friends. Well, the ones who knew about the affair. Apparently not all of them did, but her best friend Trisha knew everything. I feel guilty, but God, Trish, the sex is incredible. Richard knows what he's doing. And the career stuff doesn't hurt either. She actually giggled. My wife was giggling about screwing her boss while I was sitting in the next room, thinking everything was fine. But the recording that made me smile, yeah, I actually smiled when I heard it was Richard coaching Jennifer on what to lie to me about. If Marcus asks about the late nights, just tell him we're closing a big deal and you need to be available for West Coast clients. He doesn't understand sales, he'll buy it. And then the golden phrase, the one that was going to bury Richard so deep he'd never see daylight again. Your promotion to senior account manager is contingent on keeping me happy, babe. You know how this works. I replayed that recording 5 times, grinning like a maniac, contingent on keeping me happy. That single sentence was a confession of sexual harassment. I couldn't have scripted it better if I'd tried. I transcribed every relevant recording, timestamped them, and added them to my growing evidence file. But I wasn't done yet. I needed the financial angle. Jennifer was careless about her work email. She'd logged into it from her home computer months ago and saved the password in Chrome. I waited until she was asleep one night, then spent 3 hours going through years of her company emails. Jackpot! Email chains showing Richard approving Jennifer's expense reports for client dinners that were actually their dates. I cross-referenced the dates with her text messages. Same nights she was texting Richard, "That restaurant was amazing, can't wait to get you alone." Those dinners cost $200, $300, sometimes $400, all charged to the company. Travel approvals for conferences where Richard and Jennifer both attended, and, according to hotel receipts I found in the emails, shared rooms. Company policy explicitly stated that employees traveling together should have separate accommodations. They violated that policy at least 6 times that I could document, all on the company's dime. Performance bonuses Jennifer received that were wildly disproportionate to her actual sales numbers. I pulled up TechBridge's public earnings reports and compared Jennifer's commission statements to the company's overall revenue. She was getting bonuses that didn't match her output at all. $20,000 one quarter when she'd only closed $80,000 in sales. Other account managers were bringing in twice that and getting half her bonus. I created a spreadsheet. Yeah, I'm a finance nerd. This is what I do, documenting every single policy violation with dates, dollar amounts, and email evidence. Expense fraud, misuse of company resources, preferential treatment, ethics violations. The list was staggering. By my calculation, Richard and Jennifer had stolen at least $40,000 from TechBridge Solutions over the course of their affair. 40 grand in fraudulent expenses and unearned bonuses, all funded by shareholder money while they were too busy screwing each other to care about the consequences. TechBridge had a strict anti-fraternization policy. I'd found it in the employee handbook PDF attached to one of Jennifer's onboarding emails. Relationships between supervisors and subordinates were explicitly prohibited and required immediate disclosure to HR. They'd violated that policy dozens of times without reporting anything. I wasn't just building a divorce case anymore. I was building a fraud case that would get them both fired and potentially result in criminal charges. 2 weeks into my 30-day timeline, I had everything I needed: text messages, emails, audio recordings, financial documents, policy violations, witness statements from emails, and a timeline showing the affair's progression alongside Jennifer's suspicious career advancement. I organized it all into 3 separate files. One for my divorce attorney, one for TechBridge's HR department, and one for Richard's wife, Emily, who I was going to contact soon. Jennifer had no idea the walls were closing in. She came home every night, kissed me hello, told me about her day, all lies, and went to sleep thinking she was getting away with it. But the clock was ticking. I had 2 more weeks to position everything perfectly before I dropped the hammer and watched both their careers explode, and I was going to enjoy every second of it.